The University of Chicago Hospital was always bustling, especially the emergency room, where Dr. Ethan Cole had grown accustomed to the high-stress pace. A dedicated physician, Ethan devoted nearly all his time to his work, not allowing himself the opportunity to think about his personal life. It had been 2 years since his last relationship ended, a connection that couldn't overcome the barriers of unpredictable schedules and long night shifts. Ethan had grown used to being alone. Or at least, he thought he had. That evening, Ethan had just finished an emergency surgery when the doors burst open. A team of firefighters rushed in, supporting one of their own, Ryan Walker, injured while rescuing a family from a large fire downtown. Ryan was placed on a gurney, his turnout gear still covered in smoke and soot, but he didn't seem to be in too much pain. On the contrary, he flashed a fleeting smile when he saw Ethan. "Hey, Doc," Ryan said, his voice deep and warm despite the fatigue. "Hope I'm not interrupting dinner." Ethan quickly assessed the injury, a deep laceration on his left arm, likely caused by broken glass. Blood was still flowing, but thankfully, it didn't seem to be affecting any major arteries. "You have a real knack for timing," Ethan replied, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "I haven't even had a chance to eat yet." Ryan chuckled, his eyes lighting up with amusement. "Well, I'll try not to take up too much of your time." Despite trying to maintain a professional demeanor, Ethan couldn't help but notice Ryan's easy, engaging manner, as if he wasn't bothered by being injured. As Ethan stitched up the cut, a comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Ryan asked, with a curious glint in his eye, "So, Doc, you ever try running into a fire?" Ethan paused for a moment, looking into the sharp blue eyes before him. "Nope, I only run into the when there's trouble." Ryan tilted his head, a playful smile evident on his lips. "Well, maybe it's time you tried a little adventure." And in that moment, Ethan knew that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't have anticipated. 2 days later, Ethan was standing in line for coffee at the hospital cafeteria when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Dr. Cole, do you make a habit of drinking coffee here? I'm starting to worry about your health." Ethan turned to see Ryan standing there, sporting a bright smile. Today, no longer in smoke-stained turnout gear, Ryan wore a simple hoodie, the sleeves pulled up slightly to reveal his bandaged arm. "I'm still alive, if that's what you're worried about," Ethan replied, raising an eyebrow. Ryan chuckled, lifting his own cup of coffee. "Good, because I still owe you that adventure." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You remember that?" "Of course," Ryan said, taking a sip of his coffee before tilting his head to look at Ethan. "My firehouse is hosting a civilian fire training class this weekend. If you want to get a glimpse of what I do, you should come." Ethan was about to decline. He wasn't the type for dangerous activities. And besides, he didn't have the time. But seeing the expectant look in Ryan's eyes, he heard himself replying, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." Ryan looked surprised, but his smile grew even brighter. "Awesome, I'll send you the details." On Saturday morning, Ethan found himself at the Chicago Fire Department's training facility. A crowd of civilians and some off-duty firefighters were getting ready for the training. When Ryan spotted Ethan, he made his way over, a look of undisguised pleasure on his face. "Didn't really think you'd show," Ryan admitted. Ethan crossed his arms, feigning seriousness. "I'm a man of my word." The training began with a lesson on how to use a fire extinguisher, followed by some exercises simulating movement in a smoky environment. Ryan stayed by Ethan's side, helping him get the hang of the techniques. In one test of courage, they had to crawl through a dark tunnel filled with artificial smoke. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated slightly, but then Ryan gave him a gentle pat on the back. "Just follow me," Ryan murmured. "I won't let you get lost." There was something in Ryan's voice that made Ethan feel reassured. He entered the tunnel, feeling the cramped space and the surrounding heat. When he emerged on the other side, he looked at Ryan, feeling a strange connection. Ryan grinned. "Not bad, Doc. You might want to consider a career change." Ethan chuckled, feeling a thrill for the first time in a long time from something outside the hospital. After the training, Ryan invited Ethan to dinner. They chose an American-style grill, where Ethan saw Ryan for the first time in casual clothes, without the smell of smoke and soot clinging to him. "How long have you been in Doc?" Ryan asked as they ate. 7 years, Ethan replied. "I love it. even though it sometimes feels like it swallows my whole life. Ryan nodded. I get it. It's the same with firefighting. There are times I'm up all night just waiting for the alarm to go off. Ethan observed Ryan, realizing they had more in common than he'd thought. They both worked jobs that put other people's lives before their own. So how do you stay so damn cheerful? Ethan asked, half jokingly. Ryan smiled wryly. Because I know what's important. I learned that if I let my job define me, I'd never really live. Ethan was silent. Those words struck a chord with something he'd been avoiding, that he'd spent his entire life working, forgetting how to enjoy it. As they left the restaurant, Ryan unexpectedly stopped and looked at Ethan. If I asked you out for coffee sometime that's not right after your shift, would you say yes? Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. I think I could probably make that happen, he said, a smile playing on his lips. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt that something new was beginning, something worth waiting for. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Ryan's relationship progressed faster than they expected. Coffee dates after shifts, late-night texts, and Ryan's surprise visits to the hospital with a hot latte made Ethan feel like he was stepping into a new world, one that wasn't just about work and responsibility. However, as things became more serious, Ethan began to feel the pressure from his job. As an physician, he always had to maintain professionalism and keep his personal life separate. But the hospital wasn't a place where secrets could be kept for long. One morning, as Ethan entered the locker room, he overheard a colleague gossiping with a sarcastic tone. Rumor has it Dr. Cole is dating a firefighter. Makes sense, I guess. One puts out fires, the other saves lives. Ethan didn't want to react, but the discomfort inside him grew. Not everyone was open-minded about his relationship, and definitely not everyone liked the idea of an doc getting involved in a potentially controversial relationship. That evening, when Ryan stopped by Ethan's apartment after his shift, he noticed Ethan's strained expression as soon as he walked in. What's wrong? Ryan asked, placing a bag of food on the table. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. It's just, the hospital's starting to notice us. Ryan frowned. So what? We're not doing anything wrong. Ryan, you don't understand, Ethan said, shaking his head. Doctors get scrutinized about their personal lives more than you think. I don't want this to affect my job. Ryan was silent for a moment, his eyes darkening. So, what are you saying? You want to end this? Ethan didn't answer right away. The silence stretched out, making the air in the room feel stifling. Finally, he said, I don't know. Ryan stood up, grabbing his jacket. When you figure out the answer, let me know. And then he walked out the door, leaving Ethan with an emptiness in his chest. 3 days later, Ethan still hadn't contacted Ryan. He kept meaning to call, but he hesitated, not knowing what to say. But then, one late evening, his phone rang, a call from the hospital. Dr. Cole, we have a serious emergency. The victim is a firefighter. I think you should come in immediately. Ethan's heart sank. He raced to the hospital as fast as he could. And when he entered the sight before him made him gasp. Ryan lay on a gurney, his turnout gear charred, with a serious wound on his shoulder and blood flowing from a gash on his forehead. He got trapped trying to rescue a kid in a building, a fellow firefighter said, his voice trembling. Lost contact for 10 minutes. When we found him, he was unconscious. Ethan took a deep breath to stay calm. He couldn't let his personal feelings get in the way of his job. He needed to focus. Throughout the 3-hour surgery, Ethan didn't allow himself to think about anything other than saving Ryan. When the surgery was successful, Ethan finally breathed a sigh of relief. Hours later, when Ryan woke up, he saw Ethan sitting by his bedside, his head resting on his arm, as if he hadn't slept all night. Ryan tried to move, but the pain made him groan softly. Ethan immediately looked up, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Oh God, Ryan, Ethan breathed, his eyes full of worry. Ryan managed a weak smile. I'm okay. Guess it's a good thing there's a skilled doc to stitch me up. Ethan swallowed hard, taking Ryan's hand, his voice hoarse with emotion. I thought I was going to lose you. Ryan looked deeply into Ethan's eyes. And for the first time since they'd met, he saw the tough doctor truly letting his heart show. So, you got your answer? Ryan asked, referring to their unfinished conversation. Ethan nodded, squeezing Ryan's hand. Yeah, and I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I want to be with you. Ryan smiled. Despite the pain. Good. 'Cause I'm not planning on letting you go anywhere. Ethan leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Ryan's forehead. In that moment, all the worries, pressures, and judgments faded away. There was only them, a doctor and a firefighter. A love that had just bloomed but was already stronger than ever. In the days following the accident, Ryan slowly recovered but had to stay in the hospital for further monitoring. Ethan spent nearly all his free time by his side, though he still tried to maintain a professional demeanor in front of his colleagues. But no one at the hospital was blind. Everyone noticed the special care Ethan gave Ryan. One afternoon, as Ethan was checking Ryan's wound, Ryan suddenly spoke up. "You know, I've never seen a doctor worry so much about just a patient." Ethan stopped, his eyes fixed on the stitches on Ryan's shoulder. "You're not just any patient." Ryan smirked, his voice deeper. "So what am I then?" Ethan took a deep breath, put down his pen, and looked directly into Ryan's eyes. "You're the guy the first tried not to fall in love with. And failed." Ryan blinked, seemingly surprised by Ethan's honesty. But then he chuckled softly, his hand reaching for Ethan's. "Well, stop trying, Doc, 'cause I'm in love with you too." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. There was no more pretending or denying. He leaned down and gently pressed a kiss to Ryan's lips, a kiss that wasn't rushed, wasn't restrained, but a release of all the emotions he'd been trying to hide. Ethan and Ryan's relationship was no longer a secret. When Ryan was discharged from the hospital, Ethan went back to his job, but he soon faced the repercussions at the hospital. One day, Dr. Robert Thompson, the head of the emergency room, called Ethan into his office. "I heard you're dating a former patient," Dr. Thompson began, his voice calm but with a hint of coldness. Ethan didn't flinch. "Yes, but our relationship started after his treatment ended." Dr. Thompson sat in silence for a moment, then sighed. "You're one of my best doctors, Ethan, but the hospital has rules. And you know that." Ethan held his gaze. "The rules don't prohibit me from having a personal relationship with someone who is no longer my patient." Dr. Thompson nodded slowly, as if considering something. "I won't interfere with this, as long as you keep it out of work. But remember, this world isn't always kind to people like us." Ethan understood that, but for the first time in his life, he didn't care. When Ethan told Ryan about the conversation that evening, Ryan just laughed. "Then let them talk. We're not doing anything wrong." Ethan looked at Ryan, feeling the steadiness and confidence in his words. And he knew that as long as he had Ryan by his side, he could face anything. After Ryan fully recovered, they spent even more time together. Ethan began to attend events at the firehouse, meeting Ryan's teammates, and in turn, Ryan came to the hospital, bringing coffee and food for Ethan during his long night shifts. One evening, when Ethan returned home after a 14-hour shift, he opened the door and found Ryan asleep on the couch, a cold takeout container on the table. Ethan walked closer, gently pulling a blanket over Ryan. Just as he was about to turn away, Ryan opened his eyes, sleepy but smiling. "You're back?" Ryan mumbled, reaching out to pull Ethan down beside him. Ethan nodded, exhausted but his heart feeling strangely warm. He touched Ryan's hand, his fingers tracing the old scar on his arm. "You know," Ethan said softly, "if you hadn't gotten injured that day, we probably wouldn't have met." Ryan chuckled quietly. "Well then, maybe it was the most beautiful accident of my life." Ethan smiled, and in that moment, he knew for sure that he'd found what he'd always been missing, someone to come home to. A love without fear, without hesitation. They didn't know what the future held, but it didn't matter, because from now on, Ethan and Ryan would face every challenge together, in their work, in their lives, and in their love. A year later, their lives had become more settled. Ethan and Ryan had learned to balance their busy careers with time for each other. Ethan had grown accustomed to Ryan running into danger, and Ryan no longer felt like a stranger to Ethan's long shifts. But there was one thing that Ethan didn't expect. Ryan still had a special plan for him. One autumn afternoon, Ryan texted Ethan, telling him to clear his schedule that evening. Ethan, curious, agreed. When he got off work, Ryan was waiting outside the hospital, in his pickup truck. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked as Ryan drove him out of the city. Ryan just smiled. "Wait and see." They stopped at a wooded area near Lake Michigan, where the setting sun created a beautiful golden scene. Ryan led Ethan up a small hill, where a blanket had already been spread out with a picnic basket. "You planned a picnic?" Ethan teased, but something in Ryan's eyes made him stop. Ryan took a deep breath, then pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Ethan froze. "Ethan Cole," Ryan said, his voice trembling slightly with anticipation. "I've run into fires, climbed the highest mountains, and faced the most dangerous situations. But nothing is as scary as saying this." Ethan felt his heart pounding. Ryan opened the box, revealing a simple platinum ring. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I don't want to just share quick mornings or texts on shift. I want to share my whole life with you. Will you marry me?" Ethan almost laughed with emotion. He looked at Ryan, into those blue eyes, and knew that nothing would make him happier than saying, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Ryan smiled broadly, slipping the ring onto Ethan's finger before pulling him into a deep kiss. In that moment, all the difficulties, all the challenges they'd faced melted away. There was only pure love and a future ahead. 3 months later, they held a small wedding on a mountaintop near Colorado, where Ryan had once climbed in the early days of his career. Friends, family, and colleagues from the hospital and the firehouse were all there. Ethan stood there, in an elegant gray suit, watching Ryan, the man of his life, walking toward him in a stylish black suit. As they exchanged rings and vows, Ethan looked into Ryan's eyes and said, "You taught me that life isn't just about shifts and responsibilities, but also about the moments worth cherishing. And you are the most precious moment in my life." Ryan squeezed his hand, his eyes shining. "And you taught me that even those who always run into the fire need a place to come home to. You are my home, Ethan." As they kissed, surrounded by the vastness of the mountains and the warm sunlight, Ethan knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful journey. After the wedding, Ethan and Ryan moved into a small house on the outskirts of Chicago, where there was enough space for them to build a future together. Ethan continued to work as an physician, but he was no longer consumed by it blindly. He learned to make time for himself, for his family, for Ryan. Ryan remained a dedicated firefighter. But now, he knew that every time he finished a shift, there would be someone waiting for him at home. Years later, they decided to adopt twins, a boy and a girl, turning their small house into a real home. They still faced challenges: Ethan's long night shifts, Ryan's out-of-state deployments, the moments of anxiety when the alarm went off. But nothing could deter them, because they knew that no matter what happened, they had each other. One evening, as Ethan was sitting and reading a book on the couch, Ryan walked in from the kitchen, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "What do you say about a hiking trip this weekend?" Ryan asked, handing 1 glass to Ethan. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The last time you took me on an adventure, you got injured and we fell in love. What are you planning to do this time?" Ryan laughed, wrapping an arm around Ethan's shoulders. "Just a little adventure, and whatever happens, you'll always be by my side, right?" Ethan smiled, leaning in to kiss Ryan's cheek. "Always." And they clinked glasses, their eyes meeting with love. Because even though life could change, could bring new challenges, their love would remain strong, a fire that would never be extinguished. Years passed, filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of family life. The twins, Liam and Maya, grew from rambunctious toddlers into bright, curious kids who kept Ethan and Ryan constantly on their toes. Their house, once a haven for 2, was now a vibrant hub of laughter, homework battles, and the occasional chaotic art project. One sweltering evening, Ethan arrived home late to find the house unusually quiet. The kids were already asleep, and Ryan wasn't anywhere to be found. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Call out, warehouse fire downtown. Back as soon as I can. Love you, R." Ethan's stomach clenched. He knew better than to call, but he couldn't shake the familiar surge of anxiety that always accompanied those late-night callouts. He paced the living room, flipping through channels on the TV, but unable to focus on anything. Finally, around 3 a.m., his phone rang. It was Ryan. "Hey." Ryan's voice was hoarse, tinged with exhaustion. "Sorry I didn't call sooner. It was a bad one." "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired. We got everyone out, but the building's a total loss." There was a pause. Then Ryan added, "There was a close call. Almost got trapped myself." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What happened? Smoke got too thick, and I lost my bearings for a minute. One of the rookies pulled me out. I owe him one. Ryan chuckled wearily. Reminded me of the day we met. Actually. Ethan closed his eyes, picturing Ryan in the midst of the chaos, battling flames and risking his life. The familiar fear washed over him. But this time, it was mixed with a fierce pride. You need to be more careful, Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. I always am, Ryan replied softly. But you know I can't just stand by when people need help. I know, Ethan sighed. Just, please come home safe. Always, Ryan promised. I love you. Love you too, Ethan whispered. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Ryan and said, You know, I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness. I was so focused on my career. I thought I'd be alone forever. Ryan squeezed Ethan's hand. I'm glad you took a chance on that firefighter, he said with a grin. Best decision you ever made. Ethan chuckled. Definitely the best decision I ever made. You've shown me what it means to really live. To love without reservation. And to build a life that's filled with purpose and meaning. Ryan leaned in and kissed Ethan softly. We did it together, he whispered. And we'll keep doing it. Every day. For the rest of our lives.